Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Purdy Insurance. Visit Purdy Insurance on Market Street in Sunbury or visit online at purdyinsurance.com. Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Host of this show, enjoying a well-deserved vacation this week. We told the boss to do a whole bunch of nothing this week. So that'll give us a chance to look back, play back some of the great interviews from the show. Best of week here, Sean Carey from the Sunbury Motor Studio, Sunbury Motors Ford Lincoln Hyundai, North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia. On the Strip, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. You can always drop Steve a line by email. It's stevejones@wkok.com, our email address, and we invite you to subscribe to our free podcast. We're on iTunes, Apple Podcast app, and Google Play. Search Steve Jones Show. Drop the shows right to your smartphone and tablet, and you can always access 3+ months of previous shows. Go to our podcast archive page at stevejonesshow.com. So some of the great playback interviews we'll have for you here during our Best of Week. Legendary Philadelphia writer Ray Dininger. Replay his interview with Steve tomorrow. Plus the voice of the New England Patriots, Bob Sochi. Had a chance to talk to Bob after the Patriots won the Super Bowl back in February. Steve Blass, who is wrapping up his long, illustrious broadcasting campaign with the Pittsburgh Pirates. We'll talk to Blassie tomorrow. And we have other great interviews coming up later in the week, including Yankees beat writer for the Fan New York City, Sweeney Murdy. And also, we'll play back the first interview we did with Dave Cicchini after Dave became the new head coach for Bucknell Bison football. We'll play back that Dave conversation coming up on Wednesday. And Friday, we'll have a lean on Penn State football. Focus on that with Mark Brennan from Fight on State. And also we'll go back to February's National Letter of Intent Day and replay the thoughts from head football coach James Franklin. Let's get you the play-by-play call of the day. A much-needed victory for the Fightins yesterday in the bottom of the ninth inning thanks to Michael Franco.
Here's the pitch from Grace. Swung on, hit in the air, deep left center field. This one's got a chance, and it is up the alley and gone! Michael Franco walks him off. 4-3 Phillies win it with one out here in the bottom of the ninth inning. Second career walk-off home run for Michael Franco.
Phillies Radio Network and Scott Fransky here on 1070 WKOK yesterday as the Phillies able to salvage a win out of the Nats series from over the weekend, and the home stand continues tonight for the Fightins. The real work will really start as the best team in baseball, the Los Angeles Dodgers, are in town. Right-hander Zach Eflin will look to follow in the footsteps of Jake Arrieta. He takes to the mound tonight against Clayton Kershaw, who comes in with a 7-2 record, 3.09 ERA. Both teams getting wins yesterday. Mentioned the walk-off homer there. Had a chance to hear that from Michael Franco. Arrieta, by the way, pitching yesterday for the first time since he acknowledged he's dealing with a bone spur in his right elbow. He didn't factor into the decision, although he left after 5 innings with a 3-1 lead. Eflin will be looking to bounce back from a rough final start to the first half July 4th when he took the loss after allowing 7 runs over 3 innings when the Phillies lost to Atlanta by a score of 12-6. Kershaw is 3-5. with a 2.83 ERA in 14 career regular season starts against the Phillies. Eflin against the Dodgers in 4 starts. He is 0-2 with a 9.18 ERA. So we'll have that for you tonight here on WKOK. From Citizens Bank Park, On Deck will start at 6:30 and first pitch at 7:05. It'll be the first of a 4-game series with the Dodgers. Thursday, they'll wrap up the series with a matinee. So we will be bumped on Thursday because of the Phillies here on WKOK. So let's go back to last fall. It was the 3rd game of this current 4-game series between Penn State and the Pittsburgh Panthers. Of course, that game was in the rain in Heinz Field last September. And before that game, we had a chance to focus in on a full hour We're going to replay the full hour conversation with Steve and great Penn State historian and a former executive director of the All-Sports Museum at Penn State, the one and only Lou Prato.
There's a great history in this series. There's also been a series of years where there have been blowouts on both sides, and there really was only one golden era in the series. The golden era really was like 74 to 83. But you've found a couple of games that you found to be more intriguing. So what's number one?
Well, I mean, number one is that 1981, the comeback.
Yeah.
I mean, that has to be the number one.
Oh, I saw Todd yesterday. I didn't bring it up. Todd and I talked about his boys yesterday, Todd Blackledge. But, yeah, that certainly is one.
But, you know, that's part of one of my 100 things Penn State fans should know and do. But any Penn State fan, I don't care if they want the Pitt series or not. That's up. They better know about that because of how it happened, what had happened. There are ties along the way. I mean, I have to tell you, I think the most intriguing to me intriguing is actually a Pitt one. Okay. At Beaver Field. It was 1930. I have to look this up. It was like 1931. And remember, we were in the de-emphasis period.
Okay.
We gave up scholarships in 29. So Beesdack gave up being the coach, and he had produced a team that went to the Rose Bowl and all this. We won't get into the background, but Bob Higgins, who we know is the legend, was the coach his first year, and it turned out to be the worst season ever in Penn State football. I mean, they won one game, but
it was awful.
But they come and you got to understand that most of the games. I mean, we've only played about 12 games. I have the actual figure here, but between 1903 and 1931, there were only 3 games at Penn State. Only 3.
That's it?
That's 3. And a home game after 1960, it was 1939, 49, and 55. So it's this 31 game, which is what I'm talking about. Pitt was great. I mean, they had a great team who they think was, and I say think because I'm going to get to this later, they declare it was a national championship, and that was BS. Okay, that's part of their. That's what I'm going to get to. Part of their nine so-called national champions. That's why the crybabies. Sorry, EJ, if you're listening.
EJ, by the way, is EJ Borghetti, who's one of the best guys out there in the world.
Great guy. So anyhow, the team was so good that Higgins and Jock Sutherland had an agreement beforehand that the first and second team for Pitt would not play.
Okay.
So the third team played. Okay. Just the third team, and they won easily. I have to look up the score because I can't remember. I don't have the encyclopedia. Do you remember the score? No,
I do not.
That's the one you don't remember. I could look it up here. But anyhow,
I didn't do the game.
They won going away, and as the fans were leaving, and there were about 8,000 fans there, 9,000 fans at Beaver Field. That's the one that was across from McKee Hall.
Well, it's one of the rare games they played up
right there, right? So as the fans were leaving, Sutherland sends his first team out, and they're going up and down doing calisthenics and throwing passes and working out. And the fans are booing them. They say they're trying to show us up. And that story stuck for years. It was years later before they found out that they had this agreement.
Right.
Because Sutherland and Higgins were pretty good friends. In the year 1946, they actually went on a big tour to Japan together on a special training session. But that 31 game is one that intrigues me. Now, there's another one that intrigues me too, and I bring this up because this is probably new information for even your viewers. I researched this years ago about who had the first numbers on their uniforms.
Right. I remember when we had you on the show talking about that.
And the first numbers, the credit actually goes to either Washington and Jefferson, which played big-time football back then. They were our key rival Thanksgiving Day before Pitt. And I researched that 1908 game is when it was a Thanksgiving Day game, and that's when Penn State wore numbers for the first time. And my fraternity brother, Ted Brown, on the Board of Trustees, had the thing. And I just think that's fascinating. I mean, of all the games, you remember all the games, but those two games, to have something historical happen in those two games.
Right.
Now, the other games were historical for other reasons. And one of the reasons they're historical is, you said the glory days. It really was the glory days of Pitt-Penn State series in that 70s, 80s. I mean, it went from a couple coaches, but when Sherrill took over, but Foge Fazio then came along, but Johnny Major started it. Yeah. But that was and Johnny, and they couldn't do what he did back then. Today, put out scholarships, and they won a national title, and they won it legitimately. They were
really good.
They were very good.
Yep.
And the Pitt fans think
it earned that national title.
And the Pitt fans think that that was how many years ago? I mean, do the calculation. But the problem with the series goes back, again, I bring this up is the fact that we don't play them at the end of the season anymore. Even if we played them at the beginning of the season, the end of the season, that's where we spoiled each other's thing.
Yeah.
So coming back to long-winded way of coming back to your, one of the games I like was that one with the tie game in '83, I think it was.
Oh, it was '83, and I have a story around that.
Yeah, well, you can tell your story, but the thing is, remember we were driving and I think it was DJ Dozier caught the ball and was out of bounds, and it turned out that the game looked like it was over. Right. And the fans started coming out on the field, and because the clock up in the scoreboard looked like it was over, but they're actually 4 seconds in.
Right.
And Joe sent the field goal. He kicked the ball. Only time ever went to a tie, and he said they deserved it because that was sent them to play Washington in the Aloha Bowl. Yep. And I mean, I find that one intriguing. The other one intriguing again of the name of the modern day era.
Well, my addendum to that was, I was the third announcer on the Penn State network at that time. And so of my various jobs of being the third person was I had to do the postgame show with Joe. So I would go down, I would leave the booth with about 3-4 minutes to go, and I'm on the field, and Penn State's driving down the field. And I remember with 56 seconds to go, there was a problem with the clock. Right?
Yeah, right. That was the problem. The problem was the clock.
Right. And that was like 56 seconds to go. So I knew there was a problem with the clock. All right? Because everybody on the field knew that there was. Penn State, Pitt. That's why you noticed, like in the postgame, like the Pitt guys didn't complain. They knew. Okay. Well, then the clock does get down to 0 because I thought maybe they had corrected it. They hadn't. So I go into the area where I'm supposed to interview Joe for the postgame, and I'm thinking it's 24-21. So I'm standing there and I'm waiting, and nobody's coming in. I'm like, what the heck? And this janitor who's listening to the game says, "Man, can you believe how they came back and tied that game?" And I looked over, I said, "You've helped me much more than you ever realized." And so the opening question I asked Joe was this. I said, 24-21, the clock how does the game explain how the game ended in the tie? And I think that's a good way, because I had no idea what the answer was.
Have you ever thought of what you would have asked if the janitor not walked in? Have you ever?
Some of the media, because the media people would have come in ahead of time. They would have said something. But that's how I found out. Guy was wearing headphones on, listening to a transistor radio. 1983, you still had transistors. You didn't have a Walkman at that point. So, yes, that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Okay. One of the games in the 78 game, do you remember that one? They were
Joe kicked off to start the game, and he kicked off to start the second half because he had the wind was coming out of the north and was so ferocious, he pinned Pitt back in the third quarter that entire because he kicked off. He elected to kick off.
And remember that they eventually played for the national championship in a famous Alabama game, which we all are sick over. But one of the reasons I'm fascinated by that game is because of what Fucina did. And Chuck Fucina did is they were coming down, and it looked like late in the game, and they were going to come from behind, and they had to clinch the game. It looked like it was fourth down and inches to go, and what happened was that it actually looked longer when it went
right,
and so Fucina went out and told him it was only inches.
Yeah, no, he told Joe like we only need a foot.
It was like a yard or something.
Yeah, I talked to Chuck about this at the Duquesne Club last year. He says, "I'm not a math major."
But, I mean, you could go on and on, but those are two of the ones. Yeah. Now, there's one game I have to tell you that 63. You weren't even born yet, were you?
I was born in 63.
No, 64 rather. In 64, when they had that team that lost the out of the first 3 games, and then they came from behind Glenn Restor's team, and they beat Ohio State in a great upset. And at the end of the year, they played Pitt, and they beat Pitt. Mm-hmm. But it was that game. It was played at Penn State at Beaver Stadium, and wind chill was 0.
Oh, brutal.
It snowed in a day, and people left the game. I forget 21-0. Whatever the score was, I can't remember the exact score. What I remember is I'm up in the press box covering the game, and my poor wife sitting in the car freezing.
Well, that was the 78 game. 78 game. I brought Kathy with me to the game, and she's like, I don't think we could stay much longer.
But, so many of those games were played in cold weather. What made the series great, though, even before the era of the 70s, was that there was always upsets. And I mean, Pitt upset us in. I know people say, "What is Lou Prato?" 1940 and 1948, we had a chance to go to bowl games, and we lost to Pitt in upsets.
Right. And
that's what they love to do, and that's what makes a series. I mean, they bragged about. Narduzzi was bragging about how they kept us out of the playoffs 2 years ago. And we know technically they may have, but technically there was a lot of politics, and the Michigan game kept us out of the politics.
I will say this about that claim. While I do understand him saying it, when it came time in the week, 10 days leading up, what was brought up over and over and over again? The fact that Penn State lost to Michigan at Michigan by 39. The Pitt game was never brought up by anybody, ever. It was the margin that they lost to Michigan by,
and that's what goes on. And if Penn State happens to lose Saturday, they'll be bragging and complaining about it. And
sure.
Who knows? But I've sort of lost my passion for it all because it's all turned into. One of the things I don't like is the fact that the Pitt students still have that when they sing in the alma mater and they still throw out the words. Anybody goes to the crowd, anybody going to the game on Saturday better be prepared for some of the nastiness. Okay, most of the fans are some of the fans are good, but there a lot of them are nasty. I mean, look what happened when that guy they trace it down to a Pitt guy who threatened to blow up the stadium.
Right.
I mean that's idiotic. That happens at times. But I mean, I have to tell you that there would be a series if Pitt had allowed Penn State into the Big East way back when. Okay, 1980s. Mm-hmm. You know the story.
Sure, I know the story because I talked to Joe a lot about this because I interviewed Joe about it at the time. Joe tried to put together an all-sports Eastern Conference, and he was hoping to put into it Pitt, West Virginia, Temple, Boston College, Syracuse, Rutgers, and he had a thought in his mind that they could convince Maryland to be the 8th school. He had a pretty good avenue to get the winner of the conference get an automatic bid to the Fiesta Bowl. I mean, this is how far along he'd worked. And Syracuse, Jay Crothamel was the athletic director at Syracuse. And the Big East, again, this is where you had two great visionaries in one room. And we don't have a lot of – we are not in an era of visionaries.
No,
right now.
You're right.
Okay, we are not in people that see big picture and so forth. I mean, it's kind of like being in the Truman Show where the kid says he wants to be an explorer and the teacher pulls down the map and says everything's been discovered. So, I mean, that's where we are now. Everything's discovered. Nothing's new. So Dave Gavitt had already come up with the idea of the Big East, right, in 1979. Dave Gavitt was a visionary. I mean, Dave Gavitt understood because you and I both saw ECAC this, ECAC that, and it meant nothing back then. Zero. And so Dave Gavitt gets the Big East together in 79. He's got not a good idea, he's got a great idea, right? That includes schools in Washington, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, right? Brilliant. Okay. So they start. And Syracuse and Boston College are two of them. Well, now Joe's talking to him about this football deal. So Jake Crothamel gets together with, I'm trying to remember the BC athletic director's name at the time. But they then talked to Pitt about joining the Big East.
Right.
And I want to see Dean Billick was the athletic director.
Bingo.
At Pitt at the time. And so they joined the Big East. Then Joe met with Dave Gavitt at Bradley International Airport in Windsor Locks, Connecticut, which is the Hartford airport. That's where they met. They sat down and Joe talked about this. He says, okay, well, if this doesn't work out for them, can I get Penn State basketball into the Big East? And Gavitt was non-committal. He said, hey, I can put it up for a vote. And Tranghese said, he says, I don't know. He said, we got to really think about this. Because Tranghese could see the problem of Penn State. He could see it. And so when they put it up to a vote, all the football schools voted yes, but all the basketball-only schools voted no, and Penn State lost. Okay? So then Pitt has everything their own way. They've got the Big East. It's going great, great, great. Right? Right. Because basketball is a great move. And then in 1989, on December 20th, no, you're going to the Big Ten? What? You're in the Big Ten. And then it forced the Big East to form a football league, not a conference. Okay, you are a conference when everybody plays every sport. Okay, the Big East was a league, not a conference. Okay, you had 8 schools that played basketball, and you had a bunch that played football and basketball. Did it last? No, it didn't last because they couldn't keep it together. They were a league.
What intriguing?
And again, this is because everyone talks about, they don't play, it's all Penn State's fault. No, you made the decision and you made your own bed. Now live with it.
Well, I want to follow up on that. Dean Billig is a Penn Stater.
Yep.
And Dean Billig, we had dinner. Several of us Penn Stadia guys, old guys, had dinner after the game in Pittsburgh last. And Dean admitted he was the one who said turn down Penn State to football. I mean, that's where they could have. He could have taken Pitt into the football back then.
Yep.
And here's Dean Billig, who was a Penn Stater, got the job as a worked for the CDT for a while. Got the job at Pitt as a PR guy, assistant PR guy.
Right.
Jim Tarman helped him get the job.
Yep.
And he turns out to stab us in the back, which certainly sounds like the current board of trustees. If I could, we won't go there.
No,
we won't go there.
I'm not going to go there. But yeah, I mean, it was a bad business decision by them. Okay, now the next bad business decision they made was building the Peterson Center on top of the football stadium.
A lot of Pitt people believe that now too, because they don't. A lot of them are advocating they should have their own stadium.
Right now, the Peterson Center is a gorgeous facility. That's as fine a basketball facility as I've been in. But you can build it over there. There's land over there. They tore the football stadium down. Now you get 12 minutes to tailgate after the Pirates game.
I know. Yeah. I mean, that's part of tailgating has become part of the atmosphere. I mean, around college football, when you can't do it much. I mean, it's just anyhow. I mean, I find that how we've made some pretty dumb decisions too. Penn State's made some over the years.
No doubt. No doubt about it. Lou, I'm going to keep you here for the next half hour. Okay.
When it comes to car buying, there's the other guy's way, and then there's the SMC way. The other guys force you into a vehicle you really don't want. The Sunbury Motors way lets you take the time you need to browse, ask questions, and take the test drive and think on it. For over 100 years, the Mertz family and all their employees have made your experience the most pleasant one you'll ever have. The other guys won't offer you the best price for your trade, no matter how much they say they will. The SMC way is their promise to provide you with the most money the market shows your vehicle is worth. The SMC way is to offer you all applicable factory rebates on new vehicles and generous discounts. Looking for a pre-owned vehicle? The SMC way checks each vehicle in a 200-mile radius to determine the lowest price, then beat it. It's the lowest price promise, just part of the SMC way. The choice is up to you, the other guy's way or the SMC way. The SMC way wins every time. Sunbury Motors Company in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury, and at sunburymotors.com. Selling more cars and satisfying more customers for over 100 years. For nearly 100 years, Purdy Insurance has been your locally owned, family-operated source for insurance products. With a staff of over 20 and partnerships with some of the industry's most trusted companies, Purdy has the experience and resources to get the job done. Whether you need personal, home, and auto, or complex business insurance solutions, Purdy will help you navigate through the process. Call today at 570-286-5855. Or better yet, stop in their Sunbury office to see what Purdy Insurance can do for you.
Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
All right, Lou Prato rejoins us. Lou, there are a couple games you wanted to get into.
Yeah,
how did the ugliness?
Yeah, the ugliness started. Actually, I've been to before, and it's a pretty nice story. The first game in 1893, they were supposed to play on Saturday, and it rained and poured, and they dedicated Beaver Field, and so they postponed till Monday, and the players invited. Speaking about fraternities, for drinking, they invited them to the fraternities, and they all got smashed and had a great time, and Penn State went out Monday and beat them. But reason why is the coach at the time, and we realized the coach we know is George Hoskin. He was really a trainer, and he played in the games, and this is they did that back then. Well, the next thing they played in 1896, Hoskins on the other side. He went to Pitt. So that started he was nasty. I mean, the newspapers wrote about it, and that's how it started. It became nasty. But at that point, Bucknell was maybe more of a rival than anybody else. But they didn't start playing at Pitt Stadium in 1925. So a lot of these games, Forbes Field or Exposition Park. But there were a couple games that I wanted to go as we went through. There was a couple games that the 1919 game when we beat them for the first time.
And Hugo Bestek would be the coach.
Yeah,
right?
beat him for the first time in a while, and then we didn't beat him again until 1939. In 1919, Bob Higgins was basically an end. They wouldn't call him a tight end, and he took a pass on a fake punt and went 90-some yards, 92 yards. It's part of the record.
It is
longest pass reception. And that won the game. And then in 1939, Pitt had a pretty good team. I think they were defending national champions. At least they claimed them national champions. And I'll get to that shortly, whether they were or they were not. And Leon Kajecki, who you knew, remember that great guy, passed away a few years ago.
He did. He was the oldest living Penn State letterman, and he used to be at the tavern every Friday night.
And he was the sixth all-time letterman, all-time All-Americans. He was the sixth. We hadn't had one since I think it was Joe Badink when he was a player in the 22. So Kajecki was very good. He never played in the pros because he went into the oil industry, but he was a great guy. But I wanted to briefly about the 36 game, and it's not what happened in the game. Penn State was actually getting beat 14-0. And eventually lost 34-7. But this was in the second half kickoff. We had a guy, Harry. His nickname was Harry, sophomore named Harry Harrison, and he was a sophomore. And as Harry Harrison is running down the field, he was clear in the midfield when the elastic from his pants came down and they fell down, and he tripped and fell down. That's a true story. Okay, Rich Riley wrote about this in his book. Okay, that was forgot to mention, and this was a great game, and I remember listening to it on the radio on Monday because it was supposed to be on Saturday, 1950. And on unexpected snowfall, the team had come down. They hadn't been told there was going to be a big snowstorm. It turned out to be like a 23 inches of snow. I happened to break my leg in snow that year back in Indiana, PA. I'm a big Pitt fan, and wound up in a cast. That's one of the things I remember. But they turned around, and because they canceled the game at Pitt Stadium, they turned around and Army trucks took them back to Tyrone, and they took a train to get back here. But then they played on the 7,000 showed up when they played on Monday, and the Steelers had played earlier, and the game went down to 21-0. The final was Pitt rallied for a 21-20 win. State rallied for a 21-20 win. Sorry. The mind goes sometimes in the middle. But that turned out to be one of those really unusual games. And one of the things that Rip Ingle talked for years, he lost his wallet in the snow going from the hotel. Here's the thing that I really wanted to get into. Pitt claims they have 9 national champions.
Yes.
Well, in reality, they have 3.
Right.
They have the 1976 one.
Yep, which great team, Matt Cavanaugh and Tony Dorsett.
That was legitimate.
Elliot Walker. Yep.
In 1916 and 1918 under Pop Warner, they were national champions. They actually had the most votes by people that were picking in 1916, and in 1918 Michigan had a share of that. But the reason why they claim 9 is because historians have gone back and then looked at the schedules, looked at the teams, right, and then they've selected the champions. There's one guy named Park Davis who was a sports writer. And sports writers were big. Remember, they didn't have radio, TV. He was magazines and that. And Park Davis in 1933 went back and looked at champions beforehand, and he gave Pitt a champion in 1915, in 1929, and 1931. Okay.
They also Oklahoma State. Remember, they got a championship out of this. Oklahoma State actually did like in 1946 or 44 or something like that.
Yeah, so let me go on, because this is why it's interesting. Anybody goes to the NCAA record books, and I hate to say NCAA record because I hate the NCAA so much with the Penn State, but let's go on. In 1929, in 1915, Actually, Cornell was the national champion by most schools. In 1929, Notre Dame had most of the votes for national champion. In 1931, actually, USC was almost unanimous. And in 1934, Michigan was almost unanimous. And those are the ones they claim. Then there's something called the Football Thesaurus Holgate System, Illustrated Annual Football. And they got that in 1930. They claimed that in 36 and 37 when they shouldn't even had 36 because 36 when the AP poll started. Minnesota was the champion in both 1936 and 37. So Pitt claimed, this is the crybabies, claiming that they were the national champions when they only had, we so made national champions over Penn State. We have two, and we got screwed out of one in '94. I mean, let's face it. So it's like when I hear them talk about it, it's like now we go back there, and there's a National Football Foundation which gave Penn State 2 national champions. We never claimed it. And maybe
there's actually 5 altogether.
But there were 5. What was the other one?
Five that Penn State could have, doesn't have, that were recognized by one organization or another.
The 94 wasn't it?
94 was recognized. 69 was recognized. 81 was recognized, even though Clemson was undefeated. It was obvious who they were, but like some computer service, whatever. And then 11 and 12.
Well, so
those 5 have been recognized by somebody.
If we wanted to claim, we could claim.
Right, and have not.
Claim this, Pitt. Yeah. You're not the national champions of 9 times.
I mean, under the Pitt system, Penn State has 7 national championships. Again, 11, 12, 69, 81, 94, all some organization somewhere. Yeah, and this is not from the research you did. This goes back before they did this.
Before they did that.
Before they did this. So this goes back, and I'm talking like I went back and looked this up back in the 90s. So that's how far back this goes. There's 5 others that Penn State could claim if they wanted.
Well, come on, Sandy, if you're listening, let's claim them. Hey, at this point, it doesn't really matter. But still, it's part of this whole, go back to the whole part of this whole Pitt-Penn State series. One of the things, talk about sometimes the Penn State people who turn against Penn State. It seems like there are a lot of Pittsburgh writers who went to Penn State who, when once they get to Pittsburgh, man, their birthright goes to Pitt. You had Adam Bittner on yesterday, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you play to the crowd.
Yeah, I mean, I read his story. He was a nice kid when he was a collegiate guy, and he wrote a story about how we should be playing all that, and Penn State's wrong. John Steiger wrote a read about him. Jay Paterno had a nice piece, and if you saw it,
I have not seen Jay.
Yeah, he said it's just too bad. That's the way college football is these days. It's all changed, but business and all the stuff. But most of the people aren't being realistic about that whole thing. That's.
Well, again, I go back to look. I mean, everybody makes mistakes, but Pitt made a bad business move in 1981. Now, basketball-wise, for 30 years, was it the right move? Yes, no question. So I'll give credit where credit is due. But see, what they didn't see in 1981. This is where Joe Paterno, being a member of the College Football Association Executive Committee with Chuck Ninus. And Chuck Ninus was another visionary. Again, we're out of visionaries right now. Okay, we're all out. Okay, the people that could see what might happen, because Ninus and Joe were on the TV committee. They understood that the TV part of college football was about to explode if they won the Supreme Court case with Oklahoma and Georgia. They knew it. They had, in fact, they had a contract with NBC, all set to go. And then the Supreme Court was delayed in ruling on Oklahoma, Georgia, so they finally then had to put a new contract together. But in 81, they had a TV contract to go with NBC.
Steve, you know this too, and the younger people don't, because one of the reasons the Pitt-Penn State football series was so tense and great was not just because of those games, but because it was tense in basketball.
Yes.
It was tense in baseball.
Yep.
It was tense in wrestling.
Yep.
I mean, the small amount of sports we had back in the 50s and the 40s, 7, 8, 9 sports versus the 31, no women's sports at the time. Right. That's where the Doc Carlson games against the coach before the 54 team that became a professor then. He was our long time the old guy. The old guy, he's gone too. But he invented the zone defense.
John Locke.
Yeah, John Locke.
Yeah.
Now, those were the freeze and all that. People we don't realize it was like a 5-0 going into the second half or something like that. And the game was different. We know that back then. But they were
5-0 in basketball.
But they were and the wrestling. I mean, the Rex Perry when he was the coach, I remember, and Charlie Spidell.
Yeah.
And then Joe Badink and the baseball people. But that helped make the football series even more intense because they were winning the games, and all the games were at Pittsburgh. Do you remember why all the games were at Pittsburgh in that time period?
Well, because most of them were at Forbes Field. Let's start with because not even in Pitt Stadium, they were in Forbes Field.
Pitt Stadium started in 25. Right. Why were they there? Okay.
I thought part of it was because Penn State wanted to recruit down there.
Exactly. The alumni. There were a lot of alumni in Pittsburgh area, including Casey Jones, who was Bob Higgins' best friend, who really brought the program back when they bent the rules to bring players in from the coal mines and gave them jobs and all that type. So they really did get them jobs. That's what brought Higgins back. But the alumni wanted a game in Pittsburgh because they wanted it for the fans and they wanted it for help recruiting. And so they got the game and they decided, okay, we'll play every year. We have a game occasionally at Penn State, which they did in 31. Yeah. But that's why the games were there. I mean, it was so when the Pitt fans came, we can't have home and home. Well, we did it for a long time. It's now your turn. I'm speaking on behalf of Rich Riley and Casey Jones and guys up there. Pardon me. The heck with you. You know what I mean? It's just. I'm joking, obviously, but it's true. I mean, what happens when old guys like me are gone? They're not even remember this type of stuff. They're not even going to care. I mean,
Well, see, what's happened is that one side's kind of had it their own way for a long period of time, and they're really, because all those games were down in Pittsburgh, and they had some really good teams. Jock Sutherland, no matter how many
he had a great team.
Real or faux national championships they had, he had a lot of really good teams there. So let's give credit where credit's due. But they had everything their own way, played essentially at home the entire time, and part of that Penn State agreed to, right? And then when it came to the Big East, they were in that. That's going to, and all of a sudden in '89, when Penn State got in the Big Ten, that was the first time they lost control of the whole thing. And part of it is they decided in '81 not to do this. Now, it's always overlooked when anybody writes an article in Pittsburgh about 1981. Pitt made its choice. Well, when you make your choice, now you've got consequences potentially down the road. Sometimes there are none. Sometimes there are some. Well, one of the consequences is like Penn State's too busy. Okay, they got 9 conference games. I can't play it.
That's part of what Jay wrote. He says if you want to play the game, then you have to have less.
You have to have 8 conference games. See, and that's where the ACC and the SEC, they both have 8 conference
that's
games.
What makes the point.
Because let's give Pitt credit. Pitt, for example, the last 2 years, they've played Penn State and Oklahoma State as their non-conference games. Well, that's a heck of a non-conference schedule. Man, you're talking about 2 of the top 10 teams in the country on your non-conference schedule. They had the flexibility to do that and then schedule, I think it was last year, I want to say it was Villanova last year.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who their 4th non-conference game. But you can then schedule down those 2 because you scheduled way up on your other 2. Well, in the Big Ten, you can't do that. You really don't have that kind of flexibility because, you and I know they need 7 home games financially. And then you want to be tested, whether it's Virginia Tech, Auburn, West Virginia, in that other game. They've got that.
And if we don't live in Pittsburgh, so we don't know what the Penn State fans go through down there. We hear what our friend Ron Moeller says.
Old man tells me a lot.
He doesn't hold back when he says, but he gets tired of hearing it all down there. He has to live through that type of stuff, which hears it day in, day out, day in, day out. But in many ways, it's too bad. But as I say, it's football's changing. Who knows what it's going to be 5 years from now? We don't know. Something else could change.
Oh,
2025
when the grant of rights runs out for the Big 12, do we see another free for all? And then suddenly you have 16 schools, and maybe Pitt is a part of the Big Ten, or maybe it's Texas, or maybe it's Oklahoma, or maybe it's nobody. We don't know. That's 8 years from now. At that point, he'll be a grizzled veteran, and
you can come visit my grave.
I'm grizzled already. I'm just not a veteran at the moment.
Yeah, he's grizzled already. And what's the reason why? Because he works with me. All right. I seem to create that in everybody, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'll see you down there. Well, I may not see you. Only tailgating 3 minutes. So
yeah. Oh, it's down to 3? I'd been generous and giving everybody 12 minutes to tailgate. But that's just the kind of guy I am. I'm a generous guy. Enjoy your 12 minutes to tailgate.
Thank you, and take care.
Your station for news, weather, business, and CBS Sports Radio. News Radio 1070 WKOK Sunbury and on WKOK.com.